Welcome, welcome, and thanks for joining us, everyone. And on today's show, we have Ewan, who is a transformational men's coach. So, Ewan, yes, yeah, good. Get our listeners to find out a little bit more about you and what you do. So, tell us a bit more about your story, about your background.
Okay, so hi, great to be here. Firstly, thanks for the warm welcome. Really excited to be on your show with you two. So I would say that I didn't really know where I was going from a young age. I just fell into jobs. I kind of, looking back, I squandered a lot of the potential that I had. I didn't have any awareness. I suffered with drug and alcohol addiction up until my 30th year. And it was only really when I got to about the age of 33, 34 that I started to ask myself some fundamental questions to gain an understanding of my values and what my why is. And it was at that point that I started to train as a counsellor. I trained for a few years as a counsellor, qualified, got a lot of experience working with young people, worked in schools, started to build my own private practice, which I still run now, which is incredibly successful. Listen to me, that it's incredibly well. It has been, and I say that without pride, just with the acknowledgement of my hard work and my passion in the work that I do. And what happened, obviously COVID-19's put us in a awkward situation. But going back about a year ago, I was realizing I had a lot of men coming through the doors, and long story short, I was like, well, the question that Jordan Peterson posed that was always stuck in my mind was, you should be ask yourself, where can I do the most good? Where is what I have within me of most use at this stage in my life? And young men just came into mind. And well, it was obvious to me because I was getting a lot of guys in their mid to late 20s coming through my doors with depression and such like. And I thought, well, what would it be like if we could go out and help a load of guys who are younger than that, so that people aren't getting to this stage? And I started to realize that through my conversations with others, that a lot of young men are more open to the concept of coaching. So I thought, well, why can't I take all of my experience to this state and coach guys, right? And if they need more psychological help, then direct them to that. But to be the gateway, if you will, to change for them, so that they can begin to fully know themselves and fully walk in a path that is of meaning for them, right? So in the last 3 months, I have launched out on this new. I've branded myself as the Young Men Evolution Coach. I've just trademarked it, actually. So that's awesome. And created a coaching program, transformational coaching program, with the aim of knowing yourself more deeply, owning your power, rewriting your story, and developing greater self-mastery. And that's that's it basically. And there's a lot more to it than that, but yeah, that gives you a bit of an insight. I've tried, like, in 5 minutes, there you go.
That's great. I'm gonna push you to delve a bit more, because I know you've spoken a lot about this before, obviously on your own platforms and such, which is about shame and how adolescent young men tend to maybe struggle, and the ego gets in the way, and sometimes there's not an outlet for men. And interestingly, I think it's very true for women as well. But I'm curious your take on that. How have you seen that pattern emerge? And then with what you do, how is that impacting them?
Yeah, it's the big question, right? It's the question, I think, and I think it's my strongest driver within me that pushes me forward to do the work I do, knowing that for me as a young person, the shame that existed within me that told me I couldn't speak out, I couldn't say how I felt, that it wasn't okay to not be okay, quite simply put, right? Is what drives me to let young men know that actually, do you know what? It's more than okay not to be okay. It's part of life. Yeah, this, as you say, this kind of egoful false pride that I see so much in the world that communicates to young men, you know, I have to be strong, quote unquote. Do you know what I mean? The idea of what is strength, right? This misconception that actually my perception of that is that the kind of common perception of strength in the world is to actually not say how you feel, not to be present with yourself, to chase material, to chase glam and glitz and all of those kind of false things, which are kind of encased in shame. Really, you know, is just trying to dress up that we're not good enough, that we need this thing, we need that thing. You know, we're missing the point, aren't we? We're missing the whole point of what it is to be alive, right? To be present with yourself fully and to be present with your peers and loved ones fully. And what I realized is that in the counseling world, I can't speak about my story because there's strong boundaries that I need to maintain. So I realized that, hold on, I'm holding on to my whole life experience, and we all struggle, right? But you know, I only fully know my own struggle, and I struggled a lot with my addictions and all manner of things. And I realized that the greatest power within me was to start talking about those things more openly, and in doing so, give young men permission to be vulnerable and to begin to say, oh yeah, do you know what? That's how I feel. Yeah. Oh, what? He's standing up and saying that stuff out loud. Crikey. Maybe I can do that too. And immediately, as Brené, I can't remember Brené Brown's exact quote, but it's something like, you know, when you speak out shame, shame dies, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speak out shame, and you know, and I feel so empowered in doing it. I feel amazing in doing it, and seeing young men alongside me, because for me, this isn't just about coaching some guys. This is about creating a vision, a community, you know, changing our culture. And going back to old Jordan Peterson, I made that my I haven't put it down formally as a goal yet, but it was kind of, I want to change the culture. You know, it was the dream. I'm gonna change the culture. And I started talking to my counselling peers about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, realistic expectations there. And I thought, well, why not, right? It takes vision, it takes commitment. But yeah, I'm only one man. But if I am able to empower young men in their belief about themselves by speaking out shame, then they can begin to then go out and carry those principles and values and everything out into the world, and it changes the culture, right? Gradually, we all do our part.
And it's that ripple effect. So the fact that you're leading by example, that's the most powerful thing you can do. So I'm happy that you are now sharing your story, because I think people learn best through story. You know, think of us as kids, right? Even in the Disney movies, there's a moral to every story. Maybe we don't know it at the time, but like, your story is so powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have. And the fact that you're using it as such a force for good is amazing, and holding space for people. That's kind of what I heard between the lines when you were talking there, is you're holding space specifically for men to do that. And that's probably one of the most powerful gifts I think anybody can ever give to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Like I say, it was interesting what you said about saying it's okay for men to be vulnerable, because even in today's society, even though it's becoming a bit more acceptable for men to show emotions and express themselves, there's still a huge percentage of men, young and old, who still under that misperception and that belief that to be a man, you can't show emotion. To be a man, you have to bottle it in and you have to just get on with it. If something's bothering you, you just ignore it, get on with it, because that's what men do. Men are supposed to be strong, whatever that means, and are not meant to show any signs of so-called weakness, or what people call showing emotion or showing affection or showing vulnerability. And that's what creates a long line of, obviously, men as they get older, not knowing exactly how to deal with emotions, not knowing how to deal with people like their loved ones who are showing emotions or going through difficult times. I grew up kind of in that belief system that men have to kind of bottle things up and you don't show your emotions. If something serious comes up, you kind of joke about it a bit and then move on. Or you just think, oh, then there's nothing wrong, I'm fine, and then you just crack on with it. And instead of expressing it, it just gets stored and you just get all this pent up emotion, and it's going to come out at some point down the line.
It's usually in the wrong
and
ways,
it's usually,
right?
yeah,
Or
it's usually in a very unhealthy,
ways.
unhelpful ways. And I think that's a huge, like what you said about helping young men or any men basically, just to help to become more vulnerable and for them to know it's okay. And they're not going to get judged for it. They're not going to be ridiculed because there is nothing wrong with it. It's all good.
I find it interesting, Ewan, what you said about you're finding a lot of young men are actually really open to coaching. And I love hearing that, because it's a tricky place to be, and I've coached a lot of young men as well, and some more mature men, let's say, and it's a very fine line between those that are kind of all in and those that are kind of stuck in that transitional period. Like they've learned that, kind of like John just said there, that conditioning is you must be this way, or we deal with emotions this way as a man, not as a human being first. And they're kind of on the fence because they've got this like strong programming, if you will, of how it should be, but yet they're peeking over the fence and they're like, oh, but maybe it could be this way. What would that be like? And they're on the fence. So what would you say to somebody that's in that transitional period and that's on the fence? What would you say to them to get them over the fence so they could start, really being a true expression of their human being?
I'd say let's have a conversation, bro. Let's have a conversation. That's what let's just start with where you're at. Where are you at? Yeah, what's going on? What's happening? But it's a risk, isn't it? Like, to potentially remove yourself from the status quo, to bring into question everything that you've been conditioned to believe about yourself and the world. Whoa, that's a big ask, right? Because you're having to bring into question everything that you may believe to be true about yourself. And that means rewriting the story. And the way I've designed my current 8-week program is know yourself, own your power, rewrite your story, self-mastery. So there's a process to it. So what I would say to that young man, I would say, what's that element of willingness that you've got right now? What's the one thing that you can do in this day that is in alignment with that little peek over the fence, as you say? That one thing you can do today that will activate some form of change for you, that is going to maybe lead you closer to that belief that, oh, maybe things are a little bit different to how I thought they were. Maybe I can, as as Jonathan was saying a moment ago, like, challenge those beliefs that men don't show emotion, right? Because what we know about that really is that is just the embodiment of shame, right? Is that I can't be seen. I don't feel good enough. Like, if I show my emotions, I'll be judged, I'll be rejected. It's all about rejection, right? Everything is rooted in our childhood attachment, in those early most formative years, and all of that conditioning. So, like, it's a big ask, right? Because we're trying to recondition the things that are bred into us non-conscious. We're not conscious to most of it. So it's like, right, I need to make the non-conscious conscious. As I say to the guys I'm working with at the moment, guys, be patient with yourself. That's one of the biggest things I would say. Be patient with yourself. I think there's this common thread with young people, and I feel old in saying this, with the younger generation. You know what I mean? Like, that it should happen now. I should be here. I should be, right? More shame. I'm not good enough. I'm not where I need to be. And that's a huge topic in itself, right? In the way that the world is now developed, we get more dopamine hits constantly for everything we do, this immediate gratification. So I think I would, the main thing I would say is, let's have a conversation, bro. What's the one thing you can do today that leads you closer to that inkling of belief that you've managed to make connection with? And start the conversation, and be patient with yourself. Change takes time, and as I was just lost my trail of thought there, but as I said to guys that I work with now, is like, please be patient with yourself. Celebrate your wins, your little wins. You know, little wins build up to big wins, and before you know it, your whole life's changed and you feel amazing about yourself. So
exactly, I think that's good advice, definitely. And I think you're absolutely right. Patience is critical for anybody that wants to be growing, or anybody that's just wants to keep on moving forwards. I think patience is essential, because like you said, we're kind of being trained now with societal things that everything must happen, it must happen now, and that's it. Listen, there's something I'd like to touch upon, like, because interesting, you both said this about like men learning not to show emotion, and I would really argue that men do show emotion, but it's usually the false emotion. It's usually whatever emotion's on the surface. I mean, always anger, there tends to be another layer of emotion, something else underneath, whether that be shame, guilt, hurt, whatever, that we're not necessarily in touch with it. But what would you say, like, to that? Because I feel like men do show their emotion, but they just don't necessarily show the truth of it. It shows up in anger, it shows up in frustration, it shows up in maybe lashing out or making certain decisions. And this is a man bash. I'm outnumbered today, but I also know a lot of our audience are obviously men as well. But there'll be a lot of ladies listening to this that are curious to know your take on this and how true that is.
Yeah, no, great question. Well, I the way I look at it is anger is the easiest emotion to go to. It just comes, it's primal, right? It's deeply rooted within us for survival. So, you know, so recently, actually, this is really relevant to your question. I was talking to my mother the other day, and you know, I was talking about my anxiety around my health at the moment, and without getting into all the ins and outs of that. And also, I gave the example of being in the supermarket. I find myself getting angry recently in the supermarket, and she said, "Are you sure you're not just anxious?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. It's anxiety. It's because of this COVID-19, and people are coming into my space, and I'm feeling anxious, but I'm lashing out. Oh, excuse me, sir. You know, that kind of thing. So anger, and knowing what I know about obviously my own life, I was a very angry teenager and young person in my 20s. And what was really going on, I was just hurt and confused, right? And I didn't know how to express my emotions. So inevitably underneath that anger is our deeper emotions. I kind of simplify it in the main, like what I tend to find is that it's just hurt going on at some level. There's a wound, right? And we need to find out what that wound is, so we can bring it into the light and attend to that wound, so that you can move forward and begin to express your emotions more mindfully. It's taken me many years to be able to acknowledge the feeling that I'm feeling almost in real time. And even now I haven't got it locked in, definitely not. So, and specifically in my relationship with my partner, I would say I think that's the, you know, where we all experience ourselves at our most vulnerable, at our most fragile, at our most you know, all of that stuff. So it's like sometimes I might have to make some mistakes and then come back and go, do you know what, when I said this, I was actually feeling this, and I wanted to let you know that I'm sorry. And you know, just to be able to have the humility as a man to acknowledge that, oh, I made a mistake, and you know, has been big for me over the years. I think that male emotional intelligence is becoming more and more prevalent within our society. I don't think that what I'm doing is particularly new. I see lots of men being more vulnerable in the world, learning to be more humble in acknowledging the true emotion. But it takes a lot of work to be able to get to that place. To be able to get to that place to acknowledge that there's something else underneath that anger. You know, I hid behind anger for donkey's years. You know, blaming the world, stuck in a victimhood mindset, because I didn't have the resort. Well, the resources were always there. I just didn't realize it, and I didn't have the support network I needed to be able to acknowledge the depth of the pain. And to, as you said earlier about holding a safe space, I needed a safe space. I needed to be able to feel those feelings in their rawness over time. And so it's prevalent for me to mention this, that I went into recovery from alcohol addiction just before 3 months before my 30th birthday. So I'd spent my whole teenage years and 20s addicted to drugs and alcohol, and was completely lost within myself, And I think that, you know, you don't have to be a drug addict or an alcoholic to be lost within yourself. You know, and I see lots of young men in their mid-20s who are lost within themselves. They're depressed. They've lost contact with their self, and they you know, they're struggling to find a reason to live. So yeah, it's a massive question. It's a massive question. I don't know if that's, I've sort of gone around the houses there a little bit, but I don't know if that's brought any.
Definitely answer. And like I said, what you said, I can completely relate to. I spent most of my late teens and my whole 20s pretty much angry, all over the place, completely angry. And like, I didn't have that drug or alcohol addiction like you went through, but mine, like you said about lost and filling it with something else, mine was training and food. I literally just lost myself in work, training, exercise. That's all I did 24/7. And that became my addiction to a very unhealthy point. But again, anger was my go-to emotion. Anything happened, it was always anger. And for me, I know a big part of that was due to just feeling completely unfulfilled. Like everything I was doing, every job I'd done, everywhere I went, I never felt that I was getting anywhere. I never felt, obviously, that like you said, I should be somewhere else. I should be doing something else, something better, something bigger. And I kept blaming everything and everyone around me because I was stuck in that position or in that moment where I was, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And that just made me even more angry. And it just, I kept spiraling from there. And I didn't even realize at the time, because at the time I had no idea what my emotions were. Like I wasn't emotionally aware at all. I didn't even know what I was feeling. I just knew that in the place I was in, I didn't like it. So I'll move to another place and I'd get the same result. I get the same outcome again. And at no point in my 20s did it even occur to me that it was me. It was something inside. I had to deal with stuff that's going on inside. I kept trying to change the external, and it wasn't working.
So guys, I've got a question for both of you here. What would you say to someone who is experiencing exactly that? Because this is obviously both like something you've both experienced full on. There's like nodding along galore here, like you just know. But what would you say to somebody that's going through that now and they're not sure of how they feel? What's the first thing that you would recommend that they do in order to get past that anger and identify what's underneath? How would they shine a light on the deeper emotions that they might be feeling?
So the first,
that one, Ewan.
Put
the guest on the spot.
Yeah. Well, the hardest part, as Jonathan just said a minute ago, is they're actually acknowledging that the issue lies within me, right? Everything always lies within me. It always has done. But I would say the shift came, the massive shift for me came when I finally said, I don't know what to do, please help me. You know, that in itself was the first, if you thinking of like my life being encased by this wall of shame, these bricks of shame, and I was able to knock one out just by imagining that there's someone else through the hole in this wall of shame, and help me, please help me. That was the biggest thing. So I'd say finding someone you trust enough, just enough to be able to say, I think I'm really struggling here, or I don't know why it is that every time this happens, or whatever it may be. It's just that first chink in your armor, if you will, that in those defenses that you've built up throughout life, isn't it? To be able to, you know, that incy wincy bit of humility, which actually, for me, reflecting back, was the greatest chunk of humility I ever had. You know, everything else that comes now in life is pales in significance to that one moment of saying to my partner at the time, like, I really think I need some help, you know, because I'd been trying for so long to figure it out up here, and it was so demoralizing and exhausting. And that again is the shame of, like, I've got to do it on my own. I've got to figure it out for myself. If you ask for help, then you're weak. If you ask for help, this is the voice of shame within me, right? If you ask for, you know, you're not good enough. All of that rubbish that existed within me all began to fade away when I first asked for help. So, you know, it might sound simplistic, but it's just finding that relationship maybe that you feel comfortable enough in to be able to risk it, right? Risk that vulnerability of being seen, and risk being shamed, right? Because I think, like, understanding that a large part of this for me was hardwired into me as a child, that it's not okay to be not okay, right? And as I said earlier, it's more than okay not to be okay. It's part of being human. So destigmatizing that, yeah, and taking that first step, and then things moving from that point, I guess.
I love what you said there, though, is that you feel like you're simplifying it, but that's exactly what I think is needed right now, because there's a lot of people out there that are overcomplicating it, and it just doesn't need to be that complicated. If you start to understand the fundamentals, then you can go to complicated if it's even needed. But usually we just need to, like you said, get through that first chink of armor, and then this like domino effect takes place and everything starts to then roll. It might be uncomfortable at times, but it gets easier with time, with conversation, with opening up to it, shining the spotlight and seeing what's present.
Yeah, definitely. And through that moment of doing that, connection comes, right? Because I think we become so lost in our own turmoil that there's this absence of connection, and we're alone in our minds. And we're social creatures, right? We need to feel connected. We need to feel like, yeah, it's such a vital part of our wellness, right? You know, over the last 3 months or so, it's definitely an area of my life that's my wellness that has neglected. And you know, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but just it's so important for men, young men, women, you know, all of us to have those healthy relationships in our life that build us up and make us feel help us to feel connected, worthwhile, fulfilled, valued. And that's a big part of what this is for me with the young men, is giving them those relationships, giving them that opportunity to go out and form connections in relationships that give them that, you know. Again, going back to this thing of I've got to do it on my own. No, find your tribe, find your people, find the people that build you up and make you feel amazing about yourself, because you are amazing. Yeah, you might not believe it right this minute, but I'm telling you, you are. And some people need to hear that, right? And I needed to hear that when I was 19, 20, 22, 23, 24. You know, I needed to hear that. Ewan, you're not a bad guy. You're a great guy. You just need some help, right? That's what I needed to hear. And, you know, it could well be that I was hearing it a lot, but I wasn't, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like you're either ready to or you're not. And sometimes people aren't, but that's okay, because we maybe chinked that wall a little bit more, right? Ready for the next encounter, or so.
Exactly. Listen, that leads on really nicely to what I wanted to ask you next around relationships. So let's say there's some ladies listening that are maybe in a relationship with a man who is maybe going through some stuff at the moment. What would you advise them to do to be that support network? Because there's one thing to let them know they're great and they're a good person, but if let's say their anger or their shame is causing them to behave in a way that isn't their greatest, how do you suggest a partner deals with that?
Yeah, great question. Great question. relationships are so complex, aren't they? I think that, well, they're complex and yet they're not. You know, am I communicating my needs in this relationship? Are my needs being met sufficiently? Am I being reasonable? Am I compromising? Emotionally thinking around, we need to feel seen and heard, right? That's the most important thing, to feel seen and heard. Now, just because a man isn't expressing himself verbally and around his feelings doesn't mean that he's not feeling, doesn't mean that there's an awful lot going on there. It just maybe means that he doesn't have hasn't got the capacity, or hasn't learned the ability to communicate those feelings, or there's an underlying core belief that it's shameful to say how you feel, right? Because those feelings were switched off as a child when they expressed themselves and said, Mum, I'm feeling this. No, you're not. You're fine. What are you talking about? You know, maybe they learn not to trust their internal frame of reference, right? That they move so far away from their organismic self that they can't trust feeling. That to trust feeling is shameful again, right? So I would say to understand from, and this is really generalizing, and I don't want to fall into the kind of like men and women thing, because I think this works both ways. This is definitely works both ways, right? But I do think there is a common thread in our world with men struggling to express themselves emotionally. So I would say to women, at the risk of getting shot down here, you know, be patient with your man, and understand that it's not about you. The fact that he's not expressing himself or being present emotionally means that what he really needs is your patience with him, and your ability not to push your own expectations of him emotionally, and to try and really use your own development. And this could work both ways, from man to woman to woman to man. It definitely could. That you're available. When you're ready, I'm available. Definitely know in my relationship, I've been with my partner for nearly 7 years now, and our relationship has been through some ups and downs. But when she met me, I was still a boy, pretty much. You know, in the last 7 years, I've done an awful lot of growing, learned to take responsibility for myself, learned to honor her needs, learned to communicate my fears, learned to communicate my own sadness, be willing to show her my tears, or, you know, that stuff. That's, even now, if I'm feeling upset, I find it very hard to draw close to her. My immediate response is to go and isolate myself, because there's this deep down core belief in me that it's unacceptable to be seen to be struggling, right? However, as I look shame dead on in the face, and sounds dramatic, doesn't it? And begin to allow myself to give over to that love that I'm being shown, and to have a cuddle, or allow myself to let go. Yeah, I'm incredibly freed in that process, and to learn really what it is to truly love, for me, has been a very painful, very painful, i.e. when I say what it is to love, to allow myself to be loved, and then allow myself to love back, because shame very much gets in the way of that, right? I think the deep-rooted belief in that for me is I am not lovable. I am too much for my mother. And I've got to mention my mum, because she'll be listening to this. This is great. And I've got so much, well, not right now, obviously, it's not live, but it was her 70th birthday yesterday, and I got so much love for that woman these days. You know, I always have, but it's been a difficult relationship, and as I free myself, so we come together and learn to love more fully. And the same with my father, same with my partner. And yeah, I think I've probably gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but you know.
It's great though, and it's so powerful when you do that, because it does give it shines again that spotlight on a different way of perceiving things. Because you're right in what you said, like, you know, it's definitely not about male or female. I kind of pitched it that way just to obviously see what comes up, because it's always interesting, but also so that any women listening can hear it coming from that space, because a lot of people, including myself, can resonate with what you said there, because it all comes down to those needs being met. Are you allowing yourself to be your true authentic self? Are you allowing yourself to express your masculine and feminine energy within a relationship? And you know, it's not a very you know, like broad topic, and it's not something we get taught at school about our masculine and feminine energy and how our needs are to be met or not met, and how men have both masculine and feminine energy, and so do women. And that's not something that most people know in the mainstream, but yet it's playing in every single relationship that exists in the world, and it's something that's huge. So I think there's definitely a lot of good insights there for those listening, for sure.
And I just wanted to interject there and say, I feel like if you two ventured out and built a school, I'm certain it would be in your curriculum. And I think you do an amazing job at teaching.
Don't start opening that can of worms.
We've got some plans in the works, but not this side of the.
Yeah, but we need to be taught those things, right?
Oh,
yeah.
100%. Yeah, love that.
I can only imagine the stuff I know now. I was taught that back in school.
Yeah.
The difference that would have made. Obviously, I never regret learning anything, because obviously it made me who I am, but could only make it in terms of the emotional intelligence, how to connect with people on a deeper level. Just learning those basics, those fundamentals of life would have helped more than learning how to add up numbers or read or write or stuff like that. It's like the initial learning process that you go through when you first go to school. That would have been completely invaluable.
I think that's a podcast for another day, the education system.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way though. I'm with you all the way.
Yeah, but over the last 5 years, what new belief or behavior or habits has been kind of there? It's been the most influential in your life, that has improved your life the most.
Meditation. I mean,
meditation.
Go
to the point.
Oh, loving it.
Should we end it there? But,
no, tell us.
Yeah.
So I'd always been interested in Buddhism, even when I was drinking and using. The way I look at it now, frame it within myself, is that my spirit was looking for an answer, but it didn't know how to ask for it. So I was always headed where I was headed in a way. But it was the being present. It was the learning. It was the understanding that about presence, about that all there is this present moment. And I kind of knew that I was aware to that from a young age. When I went traveling in my late teens, I was in Thailand for quite a long time, and it makes sense why I was in Thailand, because of the Buddhism. I think that I was attracted to Thailand for the wrong reasons, drinking myself into oblivion, but I was also going to the temples. I was also going and sitting with the monks and stuff. So, although I was in turmoil within myself, there was part of me that was being called in the right direction. So yeah, I mean, meditation, sitting, being fully present with oneself. There's a Buddhist temple up the road from me in Hempstead called Amaravati, and I went and did a Vipassana day course up there with the monks up there, going back 4 or 5 years ago. 5 years, yeah, about that time. So and since that point, when I'd been meditating before then, but it was only when I went up there for that I really latched onto Vipassana, because it was so simple, and what I found is that it brought me such clarity and space within me, that I would meditate, and it was like I would come into meditation with a question. So, for example, why is it that when I always this happens, or why do I always think this? Whatever it may be, right? And then I'd be driving somewhere the next day, and just out of nowhere, it would like be like an answer would come into my mind. It's because da 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 da. Oh, how did that happen? So it's like, it was like, you know, I started to, and I think that when I put this to a lot of guys, is that there's an expectation, right? What's the payoff, right?
Yep.
If I do this, what am I going to get, right?
Yep.
And it's like, well, this is a practice. This, you will get clarity of mind, you will get peace, you will get contentment, you'll get awareness, you'll get love, everything in learning to sit and be fully present with yourself. This is what you get, and I would say that is an absolute promise, an absolute promise.
Yep.
But when I first sat down to try meditating the first time, right, and I think this is common for many people, and your head's going blah 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 blah, and then you go, oh, you get up, go, oh God, didn't get on too well with meditation. It's not for me. I'm not very good at it. I'm not very good at it. You know, obviously we know that meditation is not about being good at it. It's about, you know, just becoming the observer. And I'm glad I stuck at it. I'm glad I stuck at it. And I think some of my current coachees probably get a little bit frustrated. Oh, he's off on his meditation thing again. You know, but I keep on slamming it home to them, because I know what benefit they'll get from it. The more they're able to hold themselves accountable to that discipline in the morning and in the evening, they will get immeasurable payouts. But I think, you know, if I'm not exercising daily and I'm not trying to eat more healthily, I'm staying well hydrated, moving a lot of the time, because now I spend a lot of my time sitting down in the work I do. It's vital that I go for regular, like 1 or 2 walks in the day, and to do some exercise in the morning, do some reading, some you know, a big thing for me is now understanding the power of what I focus on, i.e. I used to spend a lot of time just watching movies and you know, watching box sets. I do less of that now, although I am an avid Gaia watcher. But you know, so it's all round wellness, focused at all areas of my wellness. And when I suppose that's the main thing, in answer to your question, Jonathan, is the balance of giving everything that contributes to my sense of fulfillment and well-being equal attention, or the attention it needs. And in this moment, acknowledging that the thing that's been suffering the most in the last few months is obviously my social needs. But anyway, that will take me on another path. So hopefully that's in answer to your question. Yeah.
It does. Given everything that you've just said, if you had to pick just one piece of practical advice for anyone listening, male or female, what would you share? What would you say to them if you had to give them one nugget, something practical they can go away and do right now? What would it be?
You don't need to do it on your own. Ask for guidance.
Nice.
We've always been intended to be there for one another. It's a lonely world on your own. Please don't spend your life on your own, in your own head.
So many people feel that sense of loneliness at some stage, and we've heard the classic of, even if you're surrounded by people, you can still feel alone. And it's so interesting to me, because obviously you guys all know that I coach often. It's like my main passion, and how individuals, they come and they express this sense of loneliness, and I will be coaching like 20-30 people a week, and they're all telling me the same story. It's like, hey, why don't you guys meet? Let's create a little community. And all of a sudden that ripple effect happens. And that's why I love so much what you're doing, Ewan, because you're creating that sense of connection for people. You're creating a tribe. You're giving people the space. You know, you spoke obviously specifically about men, but just the content that I see you put out is very, very powerful for anybody, no matter their age, gender, race, any of that stuff. And that's where, you know, those little nuggets and those the plants that you're seeding, the seeds that you're planting, even, like they will grow, and the more people nurture them. And so I absolutely love that piece of advice you've given. I think it's spot on.
Thanks, love it. It's so important, isn't it? It's so important, you know, to feel connected, to feel glad it connected with you. Yeah, sorry, back to you. I'll go off on a tangent again. Over to you.
No worries. We'll even get you back on another show.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been an absolutely amazing show. So before we wrap up, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Oh, good question.
Okay, so yeah, my Instagram handle is at Ewan Corlett, EWANCORLETT. That's probably the easiest place to get hold of me. On Facebook, I'm the Young Men Evolution Coach. What I found is that I've created too many social media platforms, and I need to keep it focused. I am Ewan Corlett, but I am also the Young Men Evolution Coach. Yeah, connect with me on there. I can then I'm in the process of trying to sort out a website and stuff at the moment. I haven't yet sorted that out. Yeah, go on there, go onto my Instagram profile, click on my link tree, and you can access some stuff through there, or just DM me through there. Yeah.
Listen, Ewan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on with us. Like you said, you know, your mission is a very, very worthy one. Not that you need our say on that, but it really is. And we're super excited to just see you continue growing, see your community growing. And we're really glad to have been able to connect with you, not only on this podcast, but just over the period of time that we've kind of connected as well. I think it's been awesome.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, guys. Absolute pleasure. Loved it.